All right, so now let's look a little bit more into our tech to pop proposals. So we talked about how the first section needs to be the introduction. So what is the goal of the proposal? It's to persuade someone that work needs to be done and to propose something that can actually be done by you or the organization you are representing. So as we are working on this proposal, we're kind of keeping this mock scenario in mind as if we're working for a company and that we know that there's this problem and we're going to propose a solution to it. The audience in this case is a boss and an organization that you work for or a client that your organization wants to get paid by. Often a proposal serves as a means to show a potential client that you can do something for them. So when you're doing proposals in general, you need to lay out the problem. So you need to persuade your reader that there is indeed a problem that needs to be addressed. This is part of exigence. And to introduce your population. So I see that in our field, problem X exists, and we are not effectively communicating to this specific demographic, this specific population. So within a proposal, you also, of course, always need solution and objectives. So preface how you're going to go about finding a solution and preface what criteria a good solution will fulfill. So a good solution needs to do X, Y, and Z. So as you're laying out what the problem is and you're giving a solution, you're going to set that criteria up that the good solution does this thing, and this thing. And then you're going to go on to show in your proposal that your proposal is doing X, Y, and Z, right? So a good solution does this, and now I'm going to show you that my solution does do all that criteria or meets all that criteria that I just set out. So you can read this introduction. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because that would be timely, but this PowerPoint you can also download. So I do want you to read this. This is a great example of an introduction that is laying out a problem. It's bringing in its demographic or the population, and it is proposing a solution. So, and then all these will go on to be unpacked. So do take some time to go back to that and read it. And as you're crafting and drafting your own introduction, please use this one as well as this to kind of see the way that two different approaches can be to drafting an introduction to a proposal. Now, as we are drafting our proposals, something that's very important that we already have some experience with are our user personas. I mentioned already, we're not going to be drafting like entire user personas like we did last time, getting a picture and, creating the actual persona. I do want you to kind of move through the steps though, that we did in creating the persona for this one to keep this in mind as you're drafting your proposal, because persona is going to help you get into the user's heads. It's going to help you be user-centered. They are used for assets gathering. Because our proposals are so user-centered, the problem section of your introduction also needs to present your reader to who you're trying to help. So as you kind of say, roughly sketch this persona, that's going to come into play in your introduction section when you're introducing the population of users that your problem and solution will lie in. A user persona, as you know, is a short profile of a potential or imaginary user. It's very specific and created so that all work that the proposal and design is trying to do is geared toward that specific type of user. So again, you're not going to turn one of these in a formal proposal or a formal persona, but I do want you to have this drafted, and I want your popular translation proposal to be drafted with a specific user in mind, and you are going to introduce that user to us. That's part of the criteria that you tell us, who this audience is that we're trying to reach. So kind of making those moves that we did back in our last unit is going to help with that. Now let's talk a little bit about formatting reports. So we'll start with images because you're going to include images within your proposal to kind of show examples of the popular translation that you chose. So some quick tidbits on images. Every journal and company usually has their own house style for formatting images. Some good rules of thumb that I expect for you to follow in this course are that there are only two types of images, tables and figures. So charts and graphs are figures. So you don't say chart 1 or graph 1. These are all under figures. Both should be capitalized. So when you're labeling tables or figures, there's going to be a capitalization. You'll see right here, table 1, that's capitalized. As you reference it, it will be as well. It's proper noun. Tables and figures should both be labeled in 10-point italicized Time New Roman font. So again, you'll see that this is italicized in Times New Roman. This is your standard procedure for labeling a table or figure. Tables should be given a specific italicized and fully capitalized title above the image. So again, this is above the image, and it doesn't just say table 1. It's got an actual label right here. So the reader is going to know what this is. Your label should be quick but specific enough that the reader knows what the image is. Both the table and its title are left or right justified, not centered. So it can be left or right, just do not center our title here. Wherever possible, use the wrap feature in Word to have your text wrap around the figure. I assume most of you are probably familiar with that, but instead of having that wasted white space, use the wrap feature. So formatting your reports and your images. So figures should be given a specific caption under the image. So here we see a caption. A figure's caption should not be fully capitalized. Only the first word of each sentence should be capitalized. Note again that the figure and its caption are flush left. So this is left here. In regards to punctuating a figure, punctuate full sentences, but do not punctuate incomplete sentences. So you'll see here this first line is not punctuated. There is no period because that is not a complete sentence. That is just a description. Just beneath it, however, you do have punctuation because this is a complete sentence. Please be sure to notice that there's a difference between a description in an incomplete sentence and then a complete sentence, and we only put periods on after our complete sentences. The first line of the figure above doesn't have a period, but the second one does, as I just pointed out. Every image in your report should be introduced in the text. So when you refer to figures and tables in your text, refer to the specific number and capitalize and italicize them. In figure 1, you'll see da 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 da. So don't ever just have a figure sitting up there. You should be referencing it and talking about it within the text. You need description further than just the description you provide here. This should come into play as you're doing an analysis on the whatever text or place that your images come from. And then bold and italicize the figure number in the caption. So you'll see again here we have it bold and italicized. So these are kind of your basic formatting, and you need to be sure if you need to come back to this, please do, or download this PowerPoint and come back to this slide. So now let's go to some common errors in just formatting reports. So empty adjectives, you want to avoid empty adjectives like, very, truly, quite. This is the same rule of thumb in writing anything basically. They're vague. So one person's very hot is not the same as the other. That doesn't give us any additional information, so we need to just get rid of it. As well as immature sounding and technical context. The still was quite soft. The quite doesn't add anything beyond extra words. So unless your adjectives are critical and they're actually providing something more or providing more detail, do not use them. It is not professional or technical writing. Meaningless repetition. So the samples were prepped for mounting in Bakelite by grinding one side of the sample and removing any debris that formed on the sample during heat and treatment. Notice how many times I say sample. A good way to catch this is to read aloud. I notice even within our cover letters that, and there were some cases in which I could see that reading aloud would have helped either the repetition that was going on, even from sentence to sentence and sometimes within sentences. So avoid that repetition. Find different ways, vary your syntax, word things in such a way that you are using minimal amount of words to say the maximum amount, right? Fewer words, more subject matter. So numbers, in technical writing, numbers are generally appear in numeral form. So the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, rather than the written one. However, if you feel the need to write out a number, just be uniform about it. Don't have one sentence that says, it spells out 3 and the other one that uses the number 1. Either spell out your numbers throughout the entire document or use numeral form. Just stay consistent, whatever you choose to do. So now to common errors for this unit in particular. So some things that you need to be careful to avoid as you are writing your proposal is that the problem isn't clearly defined and illustrated through examples, quotes, stats, and facts in the intro. So be sure that the problem is clearly defined and that you use research to demonstrate the problem. Just don't tell me there's a problem with people understanding what fracking really is. I need to see why, how is that a problem? How do I know that? Give me some facts, give me some statistics, give me some quotes from somewhere. You're showing me that this is a problem and that there is research out there to support that. Another one is that the audience or client isn't clearly defined. So remember, you're pretending to write to someone and that you're working for a boss. So you need to be sure that your audience is clearly defined. And then within your proposal, you need to be sure that those users that you are addressing are defined as well. So another problem is that the user isn't kept in mind during the analysis. So remember that the user is different from the client. So you're writing to your boss, but you're writing about the user, right? So you're writing to your boss, maybe, an executive in an organization, but you're writing about a certain group of people that just aren't getting the information from your field that they need. So you need to be sure that you are separating those two and that your user is kept in mind as you create your proposal. Another problem is that examples aren't described in detail. So remember, you need to be detailed. You need to tell me all about whenever you are laying out the chosen popular translation, you need to be detailed about it and the rhetorical moves that they're making. Don't be vague. I need to be able to tell what kind of moves these are making and what it's doing well and what it's not doing well. The examples aren't analyzed enough in terms of why they are designed in the way they are. So remember, you're analyzing rhetoric, user adaptation, and pros and cons. So don't just tell me that it was a podcast. Tell me why they opted to do that. Why do something that people listen to in the car rather than a comic that might be more lighthearted or uses visuals? Why did they opt to do a museum? Why a community outreach instead of just doing a newspaper article? You need to tell me not just the moves that they're making, but why they chose to do that for the audience that they're trying to reach. And then the last is that just not enough time is spent on the proposal. We don't have a whole lot of time, so you should be very focused and like every single day you should be working on this. If you have questions, asking questions, and really, this is going to be kind of an intense week, but hopefully it's not that long. You'll be able to do it, but give it time. Be sure that you're using your peer review and be sure that you're referring back to the assignment sheet the entire time. So finally, just need to contact me for any questions as you go. If you have an immediate question, go ahead and shoot me an email. Otherwise, you can throw it in that discussion board and I will, get to the discussion board and answer it in a more public way. But please do be sure to contact me for any questions that you have at all.